I remember standing in the kitchen, the chill of early December still clinging to the air, as I stirred a dash of cinnamon into my latte. Mom's voice called from the dining room. Sharp, insistent. "Emma, can you come here?" There was no warmth, no humor, just urgency. My heart tightened. I set the mug down, tiptoed across the hardwood floor, and rounded the corner. The dining room light was dim, slanting through half-closed blinds, painting rectangles of pale gold on the table. My father sat at one end, tie loosened, fingers tracing invisible lines on folded napkins. Mom sat at the other, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles were white. They looked at me as I slid into the chair between them, faces taut, as if bracing for bad news. Dad exhaled, his lips compressed. "Your business," he began, voice brittle. "We need to talk about your business." My breath caught. EcoWraps, my e-commerce dream, had collapsed 6 weeks ago. I'd plunged every penny, mine and theirs, into that venture, driven by the idea of turning waste into worth. But sales had tanked, investors backed out, suppliers stopped shipping. My dream was a debt-ridden, unsold inventory disaster. I tried to force a calm tone. "There's nothing new to say. I've explored every option." My voice sounded small. Mom's eyes glistened. "We love you, honey, but we're terrified. For you. We've seen the bank statements. We can't watch you sink." We called Uncle Rob. I felt the air rush out of my lungs. Uncle Rob, Mom's brother, the family's finance guru, had bailed my cousin out of a mortgage crisis. Now he was here to salvage my ruin. The morning blurred. At 10:02, Uncle Rob arrived, carrying a battered leather portfolio. He greeted me with a tight hug, his eyes scanning me like I was an X-ray. We spread my business's invoices, contracts, and bank statements on the table. He rattled off terms, burn rate, gross margin, pivot strategy, and circled numbers in red ink. Expenses outpaced revenue. Cash flow was negative. Projections were off by 30%. My mother hovered, her face etched with worry. Dad sat frozen, throat tight. I chewed my lip, willing words not to tumble from my mouth. I thought another pivot, maybe adding biodegradable liners, would fix it. I whispered. Uncle Rob shook his head. "You needed a plan, not hope." By 11:34, I retreated to the childhood bedroom I had left when I moved downtown. The walls still held photos. 6-year-old me smiling with a missing tooth. High school graduation. Soccer trophies. I collapsed onto the bed, clutching Uncle Rob's spreadsheet, now stained by my tears. My heart pounded with shame and panic. I'd believed in myself so fiercely that I'd ignored mounting red flags. Now, stripped of pride, I felt like a child again, helpless, humiliated, and utterly alone. My phone buzzed at 12:10. I hadn't dared look at it. The screen read Max, my best friend since kindergarten. He'd been checking in for weeks. My thumb hovered over the ignore button, then tapped. Reply. Barely alive. Leave me be. I shoved the phone aside, burying my face in the pillow until my sobs subsided. I didn't deserve support. I felt I'd squandered everything. Setting 1:45. Mom knocked gently. "We're going out," she said. "Just you and me. Get dressed." I nodded, sat in a daze as she pulled on her coat and waited. We drove in silence to the diner I frequented as a teen. Yellow vinyl booths, linoleum floors, warm lights. The waitress slid 2 coffees onto the table without asking. Mom stirred sugar into her mug, her gaze steady. "We're scared," she said finally. "We love you. We want to help." I stared at the table, voice a whisper. "I don't want to drag you down." She reached across, squeezed my hand. Promise you'll keep going, but let us be part of it. My chest tightened. I nodded, because fighting her suddenly felt futile. I promise. After dinner, as we walked to the car, rain began to fall in thin sheets. Mom exhaled. I saw something yesterday, she said. My heart lurched. What? She unlocked her phone. There's an Inkill article about EcoWraps. Someone tagged me on Facebook. My breath hitched. An Inkill article? Dad joined us, curiosity and relief flickering in his eyes. Mom scrolled to reveal a headline. EcoWraps, revolutionizing sustainable packaging. Under it, a photo of me standing in our tiny warehouse, holding a roll of compostable packaging. I blinked, scrolling down. My journey laid out. A $20 Kickstarter campaign. Partnerships with local recyclers. Pilot programs in the Midwest. They called EcoWraps a pipeline to profit. And predicted venture interest. I stared, numb. I hadn't checked, I whispered. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Neither did we. Your email crashed after that story went live. The world tilted. Just days ago, I believed all was lost. Now I saw promise glimmering in the chaos. We drove home under a clearing sky. Dad's hands gripped the steering wheel as he exhaled. Do you want to keep going? He asked, eyes forward. I met his gaze in the rearview mirror. Yes, I said, voice raw but determined. Mom smiled, tears in her eyes. We'll get through this. Together. By 3:27, I'd cleared a space in the living room corner. Laptop open, notes scattered. My parents hovered, but I waved them off. Let me handle this, I said. They exchanged relieved glances. My inbox flooded with subject lines. Inc. follow-up, investor interest, distributor inquiry. My pulse pounded as I clicked the top email. John Ramirez from Inc. Can we talk tomorrow? My fingers trembled as I typed. A reply, thank you. 9 a.m. works. I hit send, exhaling as though freed from a vice. The phone buzzed at 4:05. Sarah, our operations manager, voice crackling with excitement. Emma, have you seen the orders pouring in? Retailers in Seattle, Boston, Dallas want samples. My heart raced. Let's set a call with the Ohio plant. First thing tomorrow, I said, voice steady, despite the adrenaline. She cheered. I sank back in my chair, astonished. 2 days ago, I mourned my failure. Now I was orchestrating a revival. That night, we reconvened around the dining table, this time buzzing with energy rather than dread. Dad adjusted Uncle Rob's revised projections on crumpled spreadsheets. Mom talked to our CPA about tax implications and payroll. I sketched a timeline on a scrap of paper. Decas Wive, Cool Ohio plant. Decas and 6, supplier quotes. Decking 10, investor pitch. Deck 12, press release update. My parents nodded, pride and concern mingling on their faces. We ordered takeout and toasted, in matching mugs. Our first celebratory moment since the intervention. The room hummed with excitement as we plotted our comeback. I slept few hours that night. At 2:12 a.m. I sat in my childhood bedroom. I sat in my pen poised over a fresh notebook. Pen poised over a fresh notebook. December 4th, 20 December 4th. I jotted headings. Ohio plant call. Ohio plant call. Packaging quotes. Investor deck. Kit. Press. Beneath. I wrote in smaller letters. Remember mission. Sustainability. Sustainability, resilience, community. I closed my eyes, listening to the hum of our house, feeling for the ember of hope. I thought morning came, and I felt more alive than I had in weeks. By 7:45 a.m. By 7:45 a.m. I was on Zoom with the Ohio plant manager, a grizzled man who once dismissed my order as Now he asked about raw material. Energy surcharges, lead times, labor availability. I answered each question. Committing to a 100,000 unit run. When the call ended at 8:33, mind spinning. I exhaled. Our expansion was about to begin. At 10:14 a.m. I entered our co-working space. Exposed brick walls, ductwork, exposed reclaimed wood tables, reclaimed wood tables. Emma the designer, Marcus the social media coordinator, Levi the supply chain guru, gathered in the conference room. I spread the printed ink articles across the table and spreadsheets across the table. Eyes lit like Christmas trees. This is our moment, I said. Over the next 3 hours, we mapped marketing angles. We mapped marketing influences, targeted ads, press ads, and logistics, bulk shipping routes, quality control checks. We ended at 1:05 p.m. as though we just won the Super. Walking to my car, I passed the empty storefront. Where I once dreamed of opening a retail space. Now emails from Portland. Now emails from Portland. Begged for pop-up events. Amazed. I exhaled. I'd gone from bankruptcy to a national buzz in less than a week. I called Mom at 1:38 p.m. Mom, I need you to call Uncle Rob. Excitement pulsing in my voice. Full. She laughed. Joyous. Full. On it. Joyous. She replied. On it. December blurred into a whirlwind. At 9 a.m. On the 5th, I dialed into the Incan follow-up call. John Ramirez's face. John Ramirez's face as he congratulated me, asked about scaling plans, I laid out manufacturing strategies, investor interest. He promised a follow-up story on our resilient I hung up at 9:58 a.m. Stunned to be conversing with a national magazine. At 11:02 a.m. I met a venture firm team in a glass walled office. They asked CAC, burn rate, user growth projections. I spoke of our units moving to zero waste cafes. Demand surging after the Incan story. They scribbled notes as I answered. When I left at 12:45 p.m. They promised to get back in a week. By 1:30 p.m. I was home drafting a press release. EcoWraps rallying after Incan's feature. Dad leaned in to review our tone. Mom toggled our CPA into the thread. We clicked 3:15. Sending our story across trade publications. The office buzzed with anticipation. Outside, the sky cleared. A pale moon lingering among wisps of cloud. New Year's Eve found me on my balcony. City lights stretching beyond. My resolution wasn't about fitness. Led EcoWraps with integrity. Transparency. And transparency. I thought of Dad's unwavering optimism. Mom's steady support. Mom's steady Uncle Rob's brutal honesty. I closed my eyes. Wind rustling the bare maple outside. January arrived on a high note. We'd locked distribution deals. And signed a letter of intent with a Midwest retailer. On the 22nd, Business Monthly ran a feature on our meteoric rebound. Small businesses across the country emailed, desperate for compostable packaging, gained thousands of followers overnight. At 10:15 a.m. On January 23rd, I stood in our new 10,000 square foot cardboard stacked in towering pallets. Forklifts humming. 10 new hires started that week. QC specialists. And an HR coordinator. Crafting our anonymous feedback system. I watched the packaging lines spring to life. Heart pounding as machines stamped EcoWraps on biodegradable mailers. I felt a swell of pride. I felt
tempered
a swell
by
of pride.
responsibility.
Tempered by
Livelihoods now
responsibility.
depended on our
Livelihoods
success.
now depended on our success.
That afternoon,
at 3:02 p.m.,
a press
3:02
release went
p.m.,
out.
a press
EcoWraps
release went out.
closes.
$3 million
EcoWraps
Series
closes.
A.
$3 million
by
Series
5:45.
A.
My
By
inbox
5:45.
overflowed. My inbox
Partnership
overflowed.
invitations.
Partnership
Bulk orders.
invitations.
Press requests.
Bulk orders.
One email
Press
stood
requests.
out.
One
Invitation.
email stood out.
Input gala.
Invitation.
Keynote speaker.
Input gala.
I
Keynote
sank into my
speaker.
chair.
I
Staring
sank
at the
into my
embossed
chair.
invitation.
Staring at the
Emma
embossed
Williams.
invitation. My
Emma
chest
Williams.
tightened.
Me.
My chest
On stage at
tightened.
the inking
Me.
gala.
On stage at the
Surreal.
inking gala.
Dad and Mom arrived
Surreal.
home.
Dad and
Greeted
Mom
by a
arrived
small
home.
celebration.
Greeted by a small
Homemade
celebration.
lasagna.
A cake
Homemade
reading.
lasagna.
Congrats,
A
Emma.
cake reading.
We
Congrats,
gathered in the
Emma.
loft's break area.
We gathered in the loft's
Mismatched
break area.
chairs. Potted
Mismatched
succulents.
chairs.
And
Potted
shared a meal.
succulents.
And
Mom
shared a
squeezed
meal.
my hand.
Mom
You taught us
squeezed my
that
hand.
asking for help
You taught
isn't
us that
weakness.
asking for help
It's wisdom.
isn't weakness.
Dad
It's
nodded.
wisdom.
Eyes shining.
Dad nodded.
I blinked
Eyes
back
shining.
tears of gratitude.
I blinked back tears of gratitude.
The weeks that followed were a blur of
weeks that
keynote
followed
prep.
were a
I
blur of
practiced
keynote
pacing
prep.
in front of
I
Dad.
practiced pacing
Timing
in front
each
of Dad.
emotional beat.
Timing
Mom
each
coached my
emotional
tone.
beat. Mom coached
Reminding
my
me
tone.
authenticity
Reminding
would
me
resonate.
authenticity
I
would
wrote about
resonate.
failure.
And
I
redemption.
wrote about failure.
The intervention that
redemption.
saved me.
The intervention
The
that
article
saved
that
me.
reignited
The
our
article
spark.
that reignited
And the traumas
our
that
spark.
reshaped my
And the
resolve.
traumas that
Each
reshaped
line
my
used the
resolve.
cadence I'd
Each
learned.
line used the
Short,
cadence I'd
urgent
learned.
sentences
Short,
for crisis.
urgent sentences
Longer
for
reflections
crisis.
for breakthroughs.
Longer reflections for breakthroughs.
On the day I left for New York.
On the day
Dad
I
drove
left for
me
New
to
York.
the airport at dawn.
Dad drove me to the
The
airport
city
at
lights
dawn.
still sparkled.
The city
as I
lights
hugged
still
Mom,
sparkled.
feeling
as I
her.
hugged Mom.
Tears
Feeling
soaked my
her.
scarf.
Tears
Dad's
soaked my
words
scarf.
trembled.
Dad's
Knock 'em
words
dead.
trembled.
I
Knock 'em
smiled.
dead.
Heart
I
pounding as I
smiled.
stepped into the
Heart
terminal.
pounding as I stepped
The
into
ink
the
gala
terminal.
was held in a
The
grand
ink gala
ballroom.
was held in a
Vaulted
grand
ceilings.
ballroom.
Crystal
Vaulted
chandeliers.
ceilings. Crystal
Backstage,
chandeliers.
I breathed in sweat
Backstage,
and adrenaline.
I breathed in
staring
sweat
at a
and
sea of
adrenaline.
tailored suits.
Staring at a
and
sea of
glittering
tailored
gowns.
suits and
At
glittering
8:47
gowns.
p.m.
At
I
8:47
walked on
p.m.
stage to
I
applause
walked
so
on
loud
stage
it rattled my
to
bones.
applause so loud it
The
rattled
lights
my
blinded me
bones.
for a moment.
The lights
then I
blinded
steadied
me for a
myself.
moment.
Then I
Voice.
steadied myself.
Clear. 2 months ago,
Clear.
I was convinced
2 months
EcoWraps
ago,
was over.
I was convinced
I stood in my
EcoWraps was
parents'
over.
kitchen.
I stood
Debts
in my
mounting,
parents' kitchen.
Pride shattered.
Debts mounting.
Wondering if
Pride
I'd ruined
shattered.
everything.
Wondering
My
if I'd
parents
ruined
convened
everything.
an intervention.
My parents convened
Uncle
an
Rob
intervention.
tore my spreadsheets
Uncle
apart.
Rob tore
I
my
felt like a
spreadsheets
failure.
apart. I felt like
I
a
paused.
failure. Scanning faces.
I paused.
Scanning
Journalists,
faces.
CEOs,
Journalists.
VCs,
CEOs.
leaning forward.
VCs.
But in that
leaning
low
forward.
point, an
But in that low
unexpected lifeline
point,
appeared.
an unexpected
An
lifeline
Inkaja
appeared.
article.
Featured
An Inkaja
EcoWraps.
article.
I hadn't
Featured
checked my
EcoWraps.
email in days.
I hadn't checked
That
my
story
email in
changed
days.
everything.
That story
I
changed
described the
everything.
whirlwind. I described
Calls
the
from
whirlwind.
retailers. Calls from
Manufacturing
retailers.
negotiations.
Manufacturing
Investor
negotiations.
interest. Investor
Each sentence
interest.
building momentum.
Each sentence building
Failure
momentum.
isn't final. It's
Failure
the end
isn't
of the
final.
beginning.
It's the
Embrace
end of the
it.
beginning.
Learn from it.
Embrace
and
it.
let it fuel
Learn
your
from
next
it. And let
chapter.
it fuel your next
The ovation
chapter.
felt like thunder.
The ovation felt like
Backstage,
thunder.
reporters swarmed.
Backstage,
and I
reporters
answered
swarmed.
questions
And
about
I answered
scaling,
questions
sustainability
about scaling,
goals,
sustainability
and family
support,
goals, and family
On the
support.
flight home, January
On
12th.
the flight home,
I stared
January
at the city
12th.
lights fading
I
beneath
stared
the
at the
clouds.
city lights fading
My
beneath the
inbox
clouds.
pinged with
My
partnership offers.
inbox pinged with
I
partnership
texted
offers.
Dad.
Gala was
I
amazing.
texted Dad.
So
Gala
many
was
opportunities.
amazing.
So many
He
opportunities.
You were brilliant.
He replied.
I exhaled.
You were brilliant. Feeling
I
the weight that had
exhaled.
crushed me lift.
Feeling the weight that had crushed
Back
me
home.
lift. I returned to
Back
our loft
home.
at
I returned to
10:15
our
a.m.
loft at 10:15
The warehouse
a.m.
buzzed with life.
The warehouse
I
buzzed with
drafted
life.
The outline
I
for my
drafted
next keynote.
The outline
This
for my
time
next
for the
keynote.
Sustainable Business
This time
Summit
for the
in San
Sustainable
Francisco.
Business Summit
But I
in San
scrapped bullet
Francisco.
points and
But I
wrote
scrapped
narrative
bullet
style.
points and
Knowing
wrote narrative
authenticity
style.
mattered more
Knowing
than slide
authenticity
bullets.
mattered more than slide
Now,
bullets. On May 19th,
Now,
as spring
May
unfurls
19th,
outside my
as spring
window,
unfurls
EcoWraps
outside my
has
window,
crossed $2 million
EcoWraps has
in
crossed
annual
$2
revenue
million in
and is
annual
negotiating
revenue.
European
And is negotiating
distribution.
European.
I sit at my desk.
Distribution.
Framed
I sit at my
Incan
desk.
article on the wall.
Framed Incan
Date
article
scrolled
on the
beneath.
wall.
Date scrolled
December
beneath.
4th.
20XX.
December 4th. The day everything
20XX.
changed.
The day
I
everything
run a finger over
changed.
the words.
I run a finger
feel
over
the
the
echo
words.
of every late
and feel
night.
the echo
Every
of every
tear.
late night.
Every gamble.
Every tear.
This journey
every
isn't
gamble.
over.
This journey
It's a series
isn't
of
over.
pivots. It's a series of
fueled
pivots.
by hope and
Each
resilience.
fueled by hope
and
I
resilience.
glance at my calendar.
I glance at my
June
calendar.
10.
San Francisco.
June 10. I will stand on stage again.
I will
Sharing
stand on
my
stage
story.
again.
Sharing
my
family
story.
intervention.
How a
A
family
magazine
intervention
feature.
and
A
relentless
magazine feature.
determination
And
turned a
relentless
flop into a
determination
revolution.
turned a flop
Because
into
in the
a
end,
revolution.
we're defined
Because
not
in
by
the
the
end,
mountains
we're
we
defined
climb,
not by the
but by
mountains
how
we
we rise
climb,
after we fall.
but by how we
And
rise
that
after
I've
we
learned
fall.
is
And
the
that
real legacy
I've learned
of a
is
flopped
the real
business
legacy
turned triumph.
of a flopped business turned triumph.